Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching this webinar. And it is a very big honor today to have Dr. Petra Košťálová. And she is an associate professor in the Department of Ethnology, Central European and Balkan Studies at Charles University in Prague. Her research focuses on ethnicity, stereotypes, and collective memory, with a particular attention to the Caucasus, especially Armenian history, literature, and culture, as well as Central Europe and the Balkans. She is the author of many books, and she contributed to the volume that I had a very, very small part in editing. And she had a chapter in here that was outstanding. It's a huge honor to have her here today, and she's the best at what she does. So the floor is yours, Dr. Košťálová.
Thank you a lot for inviting me, and I will try to do my best while speaking about Moravian Wallachia, which is my native region. So it's a little bit of auto-ethnography from my part now. So the title of the presentation is Moravian Wallachia and its Sites of Memory, or Lieux de Mémoire. Here you can see the abstract of the whole presentation, and I will start with the really short description of the Moravian Wallachia as a landscape which is intertwined by memories of people, by folk music, by poems, and everything together, making a sort of memory-scape. I mean, from the point of historical anthropology, it is a mixture of ancient stories and narrations and folk tales and legends put together with historical events and mix all together to create some poetic perception of the space, intertwined with myths or ethnic myths of Moravian Wallachia. So I work, or I try to work with a notion of memory-scape as a literary constructed space or poetic perception of certain space. And I put here some photographs from southern Moravian Wallachian region. So you can see it is a mountainous part, last remnants of Carpathian range, which is now located in the eastern border of Czech Republic, between Czech Republic and Slovakia. And even if these mountains are not too high in Czech Republic, they are considered to be high, I mean, within the context of Czech Republic, which is quite lowland, inland, yeah. So the symbols connected with this region are like uncrossable mountain, or difficult to cross border mountain, full of deep forests and full of danger, etc., etc., which was repeated even in the 19th century in many folk tales and narrations. So I will try to use imaginative geography approach, as we know from Edward Said, anthropology of senses or anthropology of emotions, a little bit of culture poetics, and a little bit of culture history. I mean to try to perceive folklore or even literary works within the context of the landscape and within the context of the modern mythology, which is linked with this certain landscape or certain space. Carpathian zone or Carpathian range could be seen as a border. As I put here, it is the citation or the long quotation from chronicles, Moravian chronicles from the end of 16th century. I wanted to mark here a certain protection border aspect, seeing mountains as a land border between Moravian Margraviate and between the Kingdom of Hungary, seeing mountains as a border, I mean from the one side as a barrier, which is difficult to cross, and to see the border also as a space which is quite permeable and fluid and possible to cross for some people, especially for diplomats or for soldiers or for smugglers or for outlaws, etc., etc. So from this part of the view, it's a sort of gray zone of the border. I will explain it after. So in the quotation, we can see the danger of Ottoman Turks at the end of 16th century, who are approaching also Austrian capital of Vienna. And yeah, there's a decree that all border castles around or along the border, for example, Strážnice and Ostroh and Uherský Brod and Buchlov, Lukov and other castles will be prepared, there will be prepared signal fires to put them when somebody sees the Turkish army in the very vicinity of the land border. Also for civilian population to have enough time to find a shelter in the mountains or to find a sort of escape or to find a shelter in the castles, in the border castles. So from the one side, zone of protection, from another side, a zone of possible anarchy and violence and approaching war conflict. Here I put a scene from film Lord of Rings. Sorry for that, but I couldn't help myself. Signal fires in Gondor country when the danger of Mordor is approaching, because we are working here with the modern mythology, so I use it. And on the right side of the screen, you can see the tradition of restoring signal fires, which used to be lit in the 16th and 17th centuries in the Wallachian mountains because of the Ottoman Turkish danger. So once again, these fires are restored now, some 5 years ago, as an old tradition and as a collective memory, ritual and custom to bring all people together on the peaks of the hills and on the peaks of the mountains during springtime and during summer, to put these fires on and to gather around and to sing songs and to drink a little bit, etc., etc. So the tradition of signal fire, which is one more time connected with the border aspect of this mountain range. Here we can see a typical Wallachian landscape on paintings, and from the point of view of visual anthropology in photographs. Here we can see, of course, a museum in Rožnov pod Radhoštěm, I mean a Wallachian folk museum under the sky, as it's said, with traditional architecture. Also, what I see important in the landscape are, from the one side, of course, traditional architecture and the perspective view of mountains and forests and pastures for sheep, etc., etc. From the other side, we also see the mountains as full of sites of memory, which commemorate some historical events or places of battles, etc. These places are mostly connected with the late of 16th century, 17th and 18th century. On this screen, we can see so-called reconciliation crosses or reconciliation cross-stones put on the places of the murders or the tragic events in 17th and 18th century, and they were put there artificially to mark the place of the accident and also to demand somehow a reconciliation for the soul of people murdered there or killed there, either by outlaws, either by, I don't know, Turks or etc., etc., either by people from other village, which happened also very soon and very frequently. Okay, so border studies. We see the border as a sort of transboundary region with very easy cross-border contacts and cross-border people who are outlaws, smugglers, soldiers, traders, diplomats, etc., etc. So somehow they are out of center and out of order, entering into the gray zone of borders and probably becoming some, how to say it in English, uh, other people in a certain way. So for outlaws, it means a freedom not to be punished by central authorities for theft or for murder. So to go to the mountain and to find a shelter there and to be there and to live there as an outlaw means to find a sort of freedom. To live, of course, in the danger that you will be captured by policemen and punished otherwise, but it means a freedom. The same for smugglers. I mean, it is the richness you can gain when you cross the border and for example, with tobacco or with alcohol or with something else, and you sold it on the other side of the border, and then you return with the money. So, I mean, it's a sort of new status, as I, from the point of view of historical anthropology, see it as a sort of rite of passage. I mean, to approach the border, to cross the border with some emotions, with some expectations, with, of course, some danger, and to become a little bit new person with experience of the border. The same for diplomats, the same for traders, the same for soldiers. I mean, in 17th, 18th century, if you as a soldier cross the border to the Kingdom of Hungary and you go to fight against Turks, it means you probably never return. And if you return home, not as a same person, you can be wounded. Your girlfriend just doesn't wait for you, of course, etc., etc. So a sort of new status for these people who moves in the border region. So there is some certain ambivalence, of course, and the culture osmosis, religious syncresis, Catholics, Protestants together living in the same villages, etc., etc. The problems how to define border zone, of course, in the mountains. I mean, how to see the real border, because there are in history there are no fences, there are no border stations. I mean that how can we define the border by streams, by rivers, by other side of the mountain, by the presence of policemen, by descending to the lowland, etc., etc. So that is also the question. Then the border could be described as a gray zone. I mean, a zone of unpredictability, anarchy, uncertainty, stress, also the challenge. As an outlaw, you can gain richness. As a smuggler, you can gain richness from the other side of the border, but you can be also punished by policemen. Punishment for brigands or magnificence of heroes, which finally led the basis for the stereotype of outlaw, which is constructed using the Byronic topoi of proud mountaineer, proud Highlander, a little bit mixed with Jean-Jacques Rousseau, noble savage. Of Albanian type, or you know what I mean, or Caucasian style, noble savage of Highlanders. A certain uprootedness in the border, yeah, because it is a shelter for people who flee from any reason of the center and trying to make a new living in the border zone. So they are exiled from a certain point of view. Yeah, and because I wanted to introduce you some musical groups of 90s or the beginning of 21st century who are really, or which are really deeply rooted in the region of Moravian Wallachia, and through their music they support the stereotypes of Highlander culture, and through ethnopoetic approaches course, they use the folklore in a sort of folk, rock, and jazz way. I will show you after that. So I've chosen several groups. Mňága Žďorb, Neres, Fleret, Čechomor, Tomáš Kočko, and Vlasta Redl. And I will just translate some of their songs in English. So these groups or musical bands are working with multi-layered image of Moravian Wallachia using allusions on Highlanders, on the freedom of outlaws, on the rebels. So once again, the reminiscence of 30 Years' War and Wallachian rebellion against Habsburg Empire, Habsburg government. And they put really a stress or they point out on the regional identity of Moravian Wallachia. While speaking about Moravian Wallachia, of course, we should mention the process of exoticization during the late 19th century Czechoslovak ethnographic exhibition, which showed Moravian Wallachia as really oriental, exotic region of Slavic ethnic groups and nations within Austro-Hungarian Empire at the late 19th century. It was also somehow a myth accentuating the, how to say in English, the exclusiveness maybe of the Highlander tradition face to face with other Highlander traditions, as Byronic topoi we already mentioned, because during the Romanticist period, of course, all writers and poets were influenced by Gordon Byron, or they were influenced by Pushkin works on Caucasus. So they somehow worked with the stereotype of Highlander built on these topoi, and they just tried to make the same stereotype on Moravian Wallachia mountains or on Slovakia mountains, as for example Tatra or Fatra mountain ranges, as I will show after that. So during this exhibition, they were what was shown there. It was a part of Wallachian traditional village. A part of this exhibition are now showed in Rožnov pod Radhoštěm, in the museum, in the open air, Wallachian museum in the open air. And what was shown there? So Wallachian inn, traditional inn with slivovica and Wallachian traditional music. The song "We are Wallachians, we are from one family" was sung there throughout the whole day of the exhibition, even if this song is completely invented for this occasion of Czechoslovak ethnographic exhibition. It is not a folk song, Moravian Wallachia folk song, but it was invented especially for the occasion of exhibition. And this song became really famous, and it was sung after that during football matches and during hockey matches, and considered to be an expression of Wallachian, I don't know, soul, yeah, if we can say it like that. Okay, so exhibition, yeah. Wallachian traditional musical groups singing Wallachian folk songs and dress in a very typical traditional dress, which is marked by blueprint tradition, and blueprint became several years ago a part of intangible cultural heritage of UNESCO. So starting with this moment, Wallachian traditional dress is much more accentuated during folk festivals as a typical mark or brand from Moravian Wallachia. Another brand from Wallachia is a traditional male dance, which is danced with axes and sticks, wooden sticks, called palash. This dance is called odzemek. and odzemek means jumping from the earth. It is a typical male dance, here, of course, danced by adult or young men, and there are even festivals in odzemek, and odzemek is on the first degree now to be inscribed also in the intangible cultural heritage as UNESCO, especially the school for young dancers of odzemek, which is a sort of continuation of the tradition and preservation of cultural heritage. Literary image of Moravian Wallachia was also coined after the Czechoslovak exhibition in the late 90s, before the Second World War, for example, by writers as Kramoliš or Oldřich Šuléš. There are many books about Moravian Wallachia, even like historical roman speaking about 30 Years' War and Wallachian rebellion. And once again, what is stressed in these books is, of course, a characteristic of the outlaw, the revolt against the authority, and the defense of civilians living in the villages, etc., etc. So once again, it is the continuation and reinterpretation of the same stereotype. We have, of course, prosaic works, and we have also poetic works. For example, the poet Ladislav Nezdařil, who came from the region of Moravian Wallachia, was very famous, especially in the region. His poetry is believed to be really connected with the landscape. I mean, that if you just walk across the country and you will see the hills and mountains and forests. So they are really forests linked with poems of Ladislav Nezdařil, and from the other side, there are mountains linked with the poems of Ladislav Nezdařil, etc., etc. And today, his poetry was put on on musical way by a musical group of Tomáš Kočko. At the end of the presentation, I will show you some links also on YouTube, so you can listen the music and even to translate the lyrics. So once again, Kramoliš, from the point of view of visual anthropology, of course, the stereotype of Moravian Wallachian in the films of 90s, with the characteristics as a fair man with a specific humor, a very generous man, at the first glance, simple from the point of view of people coming from big cities as Prague or Brno or Olomouc, but at the second glance, the only real man in the film. I mean that, once again, combining the courageous aspect of Wallachian rebels, etc., etc. Even during communist time, a very famous film which is called Ballad for the Outlaw, and it was played by Husa na provázku Theatre, and this story based on late 19th century outlaw named Nikola Šuhaj from the territory of today's Western Ukraine was played in 60s and 70s, once again as a sort of revolt against communist regime, using absolutely the same characteristics as for Wallachian stereotype, meaning Highlanders, outlaws, against the central power, independence and anarchy, and the protection of civilian population, etc., etc. So once again, the ballad for the outlaw. with the Czechoslovak exhibition, we can speak or we can consider within the frame of the Czechoslovak exhibition the context of the frontier Orientalism, of the very close border with the alterity in the case of Moravian Wallachia, the same so-called familiar Orientalism construction, like artificial transfer of traditional architecture, here the wooden churches from the region of Transcarpathia, to Czechoslovak exhibition to point out the so-called Oriental part of the heritage during the Czechoslovak exhibition, and once again the Oriental part as the rebel part of the heritage. Once again, outlaws and the anarchy and the courageous people against the central authorities. On this photograph or on this slide, we can see a memorial at Bedova. It is located in the mountain pass in southern Carpathian range, in Hrozenkov mountain pass, near Slovakia. So between Moravia, southeastern Moravia and Slovakia. And that is the real site of the memory connected with the historical event, once again, Frontier Orientalism construction, because it is a reminiscence of the battle between Moravian army, and between Ottoman Turkish army in the late 17th century, in 1663, in the beginning of October. And there's many folk tales and legends. Also in historical chronicles, we find a lot of mentions about 200 of Wallachians who died in the mountain pass of Hrozenkov because they were just abandoned by their leaders, but they stayed in the pass trying to protect civilian population in the villages in the Moravian territory against Turks coming from the east. So once again, there is a certain I would say mythologization or reinterpretation of the stereotypical image of Wallachians as a border patrol, as an outlaws, as an soldiers who are protecting border against enemy. Here you can see some border castles in the Moravian Wallachia landscape. It is a castle of Lukov, and here you can see a castle of Buchlov. They were both situated and located really near the land border, and they were guarding mountain passes which led from Kingdom of Hungary, Hungarian Kingdom, so today's Slovakia, to Moravian Margraviate or Bohemian Kingdom territory. So border castles. And in this slide, we can see another really important site of memory, which is from the Second World War. There is a memorial in Ploština village, mountainous village in southern Wallachia, Moravian Wallachia, which is linked with the resistance to Nazism at the end of Second World War. On the black-white photograph, we can see the traditional Wallachian houses inhabited by civilians. And these inhabitants of Ploština, they used to feed and they gave the shelter for the resistant fighters at the end of the Second World War. And when Nazi soldiers came to the hills, to Ploština, and they asked where are resistant soldiers, etc., etc. So these inhabitants just refused to say anything, and they were burned out with their houses, with their children, at the very end of the Second World War. So the burnt houses became a sort of site of the memory for the people from the whole region who were coming there in 45 at the end of the war, and each year, I mean 46, 47, etc., etc. And it's a repeated tradition that each year at the end of the April, there is a big gathering of people and a reminiscence of the massacre in Ploština and other villages in Wallachia, which are in surroundings. So here you can see the memorial of Ploština, which is now destroyed village. And yeah, so the same Ploština and crosses for 24 people who died in flames of the burnt houses at the end of Second World War. On these photographs, you can see the ruins of the village and on the left, people living there just before the massacre of the population of Ploština. And another memorial in near Wallachian village called Prlov with names of victims, once again burned down in their houses because they just refused to tell that they are supporting resistance fighters, etc., etc. So the memory here, once again, is somehow connected with the resistance and outlaws and independence and a sort of giving shelter to people who need it. And all together is like covered by the mountainous landscape. Yeah. And in this part, and I hope I have some 5 minutes now, not more, I will just introduce to you some musical groups which comes from the region of Moravian Wallachia and whose music is somehow connected. So Mňága a Žďorb, the first group, which is really difficult to pronounce, all these words comes from Wallachian dialect. Mňága means the word of the cat, meow, and Žďorb is a garbage. And it is said that they just didn't know what these words mean. They just say, okay, it sounds well, so we will name our group Mňága a Žďorb. And later they just discovered that it means meow and garbage. And they play a sort of rock and folk rock, but in some songs they are also connected with the region of Wallachia. And I especially like this song in Valašské Meziříčí. It's a unofficial capital of Moravian Wallachia, surrounded by mountains in northern Moravian Wallachia region, and it is a sort of a variant of Jim Morrison break on through the other side a little bit. Another musical group, Čechomor. It is a combination of words Czechia, I mean Bohemia, and Mor as Moravia, but Mor means also the death. And it is a play, I mean, it is a game between words. Moravians will kill all the people coming from Czechia and Bohemia together with Moravia. It's a joke, finally, a sort of joke. And this music is much more traditional, based on the folklore, on Moravian folklore. They are playing on violin, they are sometimes even playing on cymbal. And here we can see the traditional folk songs, which is in their version a little bit rockified, but with drums and electronic sounds and everything. But it is based on a traditional Wallachian song about newly recruited soldiers to the war. And normally these songs are very tragic because these boys just don't want to go to the war. And there is also a sort of lamentation when they say goodbye to their girlfriends, etc., saying that I will return in 7 years. Do you wait for me? And she's saying probably not, or probably yes, or I don't know. And then she's just not returning in 7 years, and she is waiting, etc. So it is a sort of tragic ballad of the newly recruited soldiers. Another musical group called Fleret, with a very famous singer Jarmila Šuláková dressed in Moravian Wallachian dress, singing the song once again from Moravian Wallachia, modern song, but you can see, I hope, on the translation that they are working all the times and repeating the same topoi about mountains, about independence, about proud Highlanders, etc., etc., who are able to distinguish the truth and the lies, etc., etc., and about mountains who will not betray you, so you can find a shelter in any case you need, etc., etc. Vlasta Redl singing with Flaret, once again, about the beauties of Moravian Wallachia, and another musical group called Tomáš Kočko Band. And in this slide, you can see several albums of Tomáš Kočko, which makes a sort of folk rock jazz indie music with translations, once again, based on the traditional Moravian Wallachia songs and poems about the tragic love of young girl, once again. The first time the cherry tree is young, the second time the leaf falls, the third time a man falls down. The first time she is beloved, the second time she falls, the third time she is alone and stays just by herself. This is the famous Wallachian song about abandoned girl. Another album of Tomáš Kočko, The Way to the South, and here he is combining some motifs from South Slavic music, from Balkan music, from Serbia, from Croatia, Slovenia, and he is mixing in a very specific way this kind of music with traditional Wallachian songs, connected once again with the Carpathian range. So very frequently you find there songs dedicated to the mountain of Lopenik, to the mountain of Javorina, to the mountain of Radhošť, etc., etc. And probably the last song translated here, because we are now probably out of time. Tomáš Kočko and orchestra, Turkish ballad motif entitled Captured by Turks, which is very emotional song, once again based on the Eastern Moravian region or South Moravian region. But this variant has a lot of other variants in Hungary, in northern Austria, even in Slovakia, of course, in southern Poland and in western Ukraine, in Bulgaria, Romania, etc., because it's a collective historical experience with Ottoman Empire taking slaves, often working age populations and young people and children, I mean big children, not small children, from these areas to Crimea or to Constantinople to be sold there as slaves. So it is an emotional song about Turks coming into the village and asking a woman, a widow, or asking, forcing her to go. And she says, "How can I go with you? I have 4 children. Whom I shall leave them? You can send the first child to the school. The second child you can send to the army. The third baby girl you can send to the castle. And the small one, the fourth one, we will bring him with us." And when they arrived to the border, the small baby starts to cry. The widow bent the heather, bent the birch tree, laid the child in the cradle. And when the wind blows, it's like your mother rocks you in her arms. When the snow comes, it's like your mother covering you with a blanket. When stars appears, as your mother is coming to you. And finally, there is a tragic end because she is forced to leave the child there because the child is crying. And of course, Turks are taking slaves, not small child. And so she leaves the child and she says, "I regret the most, the youngest one." And when they cross the mountains, she just, her heart was broken. So it is a sort of a tragic ballad made on the motif captured by Turks, balladic motif, which is widespread in the region, not only in Moravian Wallachia, of course. So, at the end of this presentation, I just wanted to show that we are working here with a kind of poetic landscape or memoryscape, and with the poetry which is somehow translated in the landscape, and poems which are directly linked with mountains and forests and pastures and everything you just see around you when you walk through the landscape. So we have, of course, a lot of characteristic legends coming from Moravian Wallachia, as cheated devil, hidden treasures, wizards flying on dragons, etc., which are really unusual within the frame of the whole Czech Republic. I mean that there is really a specific variant of these folk tales and legends, especially in Moravian Wallachia, and the basis of these stories is probably linked with Carpathian range and doesn't correspond with the rest of the Czech Republic. And once again, the landscape of Moravian Wallachia with typical rocks connected with stories of hidden treasures, etc. Another folk tale about the cheated devil. And yeah, and probably the end of the presentation now, because I think that we are out of time. Thank you a lot for your attention. And if you are some questions, I'm just prepared to answer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Košťálová, for your very interesting presentation. I'm a high school teacher in Northern Illinois. I teach history to students with special needs, and I really like your approach of using modern music, sites, landscapes, literature, stuff that students know very well. They know modern music, they know things. It's very high interest. I always tell my students that there's a difference between history and the past. The past is just what happened. That can't change. But history is our interpretation. It's how we remember it, which is very similar to what you were saying about memory-scape and sites of memory. I found that very fascinating. Its approach, I kind of want to maybe look to see if I can turn that into a lesson for my high school students. So thank you so much for your presentation. I have a few questions, if you'd be willing.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the border region,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a big difference between the border regions and some of the other areas. Are those differences still visible today? Are there still differences between like what used to be the border regions, and is that still visible in the memory today?
Mm-hmm. It is visible, and it was accentuated during the separation of Czechoslovakia into, or the split of Czechoslovakia into the Czech Republic and Slovakian Republic in 93. I mean that before, as I come from the border region, we used to use Slovak language, for example, normally, and to cross the border on the so-called green line all the time. So on the green line, of course, you see border castles, but there is a road which goes to Slovakia, I mean to Slovakian city, which from my point of view is much more close than, for example, Brno or Prague or Olomouc, which is really interesting from the point of view of regional identity as you distinguish the past and the history. I think it's really important to see it on the case studies, even on your own personal experiences. Because I somehow relived the experience of 17th, 18th century with the split of Czechoslovakia. As for Wallachians, the biggest city, but also the enemy somehow, was Vienna. Never the Prague, I mean, never the capital of Czech Republic. And from my class at high school, nobody was in Prague. I mean, during the time of final exams of the school, nobody was in Prague. Nobody knows anything from Prague, but everybody knew everything from Vienna Historical Center. And finally, for all journeys from the school, etc., etc., we just came to Slovakian part of the border. So it was normal for us to go to Slovakia to listen the Slovakian language. I mean, that is the permeability of the border. But with the split in 1993, there was suddenly the big difference as coming to another state unit. But for my generation, it is somehow till today a little bit same emotion towards Slovakia, but not for the younger generation. For them, it's really another state. So very visible border. I mean, that coming to Slovakia means to take your passport or identity card and to cross the border. It's not my case. I mean that for us, it was just, okay, continue the road from this village to another village, and you're just in Slovakia, speaking the same dialect, because Moravian Wallachia dialect, it's really the same as the Western Slovakian Moravian dialect. I mean, Wallachian, from the Western Slovakian part. It's quite the same, yeah, even if differences, of course, grow because of the split of the two republics. Yeah, and also, I mean, the historical development of Czechia, and I don't like the name of Czechia because I'm used just to Czechoslovakia. But the historical development is, of course, different than the development of Slovakian Republic. So I mean that the split is just widening as the scissors. But and traces are still visible in the landscape. I mean, you can see the castles, you can see the memorials in the mountain passes, you can see even the ruins of so-called Szance, small fortresses built against Ottoman Turks in 17 and at the very beginning of the 18th century, just built on the border, mostly from, I don't know, bricks and wood. So it is not a castle, but it was just a very simple fortress. And now you can find these ruins. So it is visible in the landscape till today, like the difference between.
Thank you so much. I don't have any other questions. Does anybody have questions for Dr. Košťálová? Well, thank you. So interesting. And I really thank you for your time and for your wonderful presentation. I'm sure Prague is a lot nicer than Northern Illinois right now. It's probably a lot
I am glad
nicer.
to
It's
be
gloomy
invited
and
in this platform. Yeah. Okay.
thank you so much.
Me too. I thank for the invitation and hoping to see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you.